The dust of Silver Creek swirled like a golden haze beneath the merciless August sun as Daisy Vaughn lowered her father's Winchester rifle, her heart hammering in her chest as she stared at the scene before her. The notorious outlaw who terrorized her family's ranch for months lay writhing in the dirt, clutching his shoulder where her bullet had found its mark. But it wasn't the wounded criminal who captured her attention. It was the cowboy kneeling in the dust between her and certain death, blood streaming from a gash across his temple, his once pristine white shirt now torn and stained crimson. "I ain't done fighting yet," he said, his voice raw but determined as he struggled to rise, positioning himself once more as a human shield between Daisy and the remaining bandits who'd attacked her family's homestead. Daisy had never seen a man so stubborn or so brave in all her 22 years in the Arizona Territory. The year was 1885, and she'd learned early that survival required more than just hope and prayer. But as she watched Nathan James push himself up from the ground, refusing to yield despite the odds stacked against them, something shifted inside her chest, something that felt dangerously close to admiration. "Stay down," she hissed, raising her rifle again as the remaining two outlaws circled on horseback, looking for an opening. "You've done enough, stranger." Nathan spat blood onto the parched earth and drew his revolver with a surprisingly steady hand. "Not by half, madam, not by half." The sun beat down on Daisy's shoulders as she steadied her breathing. Her father had taught her to shoot before she could properly write her name, and though her hands trembled slightly, her aim remained true. This wasn't the first time outlaws had targeted their modest cattle ranch, but it was the first time someone had stepped in to help, especially someone who had no stake in their survival. "On your left," Nathan shouted suddenly, and Daisy pivoted, firing at the outlaw who tried to flank them. Her bullet caught him in the chest, and he tumbled from his horse with a strangled cry. The final bandit, seeing his companions fallen, wheeled his mount around and galloped away, disappearing into the shimmering heat waves rising from the distant hills. Only when the dust settled did Daisy allow herself to lower her weapon. The cowboy Nathan finally succumbed to his injuries, collapsing into the dirt once more. Without hesitation, she rushed to his side, pressing her handkerchief against the wound on his head. "Fool man," she muttered, though there was no real venom in her words. "You nearly got yourself killed." His eyes fluttered open, surprisingly blue against his sun-weathered face. Couldn't let them hurt you." "I can take care of myself," Daisy replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Come on. Let's get you to the house before you bleed out all over my father's land." With considerable effort, she helped Nathan to his feet and guided him toward the modest ranch house in the distance. He leaned heavily against her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Never caught your name, madam," he managed between pained steps. "Daisy," she said. "Daisy Vaughn." "Nathan James," he replied, attempting a smile that turned into a grimace. "Pleasure's all mine, Miss Vaughn, though I do wish we'd met under different circumstances." Daisy felt a reluctant smile tug at her lips. "Well, Mr. James, most men just bring flowers when they want to make an impression." His laugh was weak but genuine. "Next time, then." She couldn't explain why her heart skipped a beat at those words, next time, as if there would be one. As if this bloodied stranger would be anything more than a passing moment in her life. Yet something in his determined eyes made her wonder if perhaps fate had more in store for them both than a chance encounter on a dusty afternoon. By the time they reached the ranch house, Nathan was barely conscious. Daisy's younger brother Daniel rushed out to help, his eyes widening at the blood-covered stranger. "Get Pa," Daisy instructed as they maneuvered Nathan through the door, "and tell Ma to bring her medicine kit." They laid the wounded cowboy on the kitchen table, the only surface large enough to accommodate his tall frame. Daisy worked quickly to remove his shirt, revealing not only the fresh wounds from today's fight, but scars that told stories of a hard life lived on unforgiving lands. Her father, Thomas Vaughn, burst into the room, his weathered face creased with concern. "What in tarnation happened, Carlson's gang?" Daisy explained, pressing a clean cloth to Nathan's head wound. "They came for the cattle. This man, he rode in from nowhere, helped me fight them off." Thomas's expression softened slightly as he looked at the unconscious stranger. "One of McAllister's men." "Don't think so," Daisy replied. "Never seen him before." Her mother entered with her medicine box, a collection of remedies both learned from her own mother and acquired from the occasional doctor passing through Silver Creek. Eleanor Vaughn had tended more wounds than most battlefield surgeons, living as they did in a place where law and order remained concepts rather than realities. "Warm water and whiskey," Eleanor instructed Daniel, who hurried to comply. To Daisy, she said, "Hold his shoulders. This will hurt him, even unconscious." For the next hour they worked to clean and stitch Nathan's wounds. The bullet had only grazed his side, but the blow to his head concerned Eleanor more. "He needs rest," she declared finally, "and watching through the night." "I'll take first watch," Daisy volunteered quickly, perhaps too quickly, judging by the knowing look that passed between her parents. "Very well," her father agreed after a moment, "but we'll move him to the spare room first." With Daniel's help, Thomas carried the still unconscious Nathan to the small bedroom that occasionally housed ranch hands during busy seasons. Once they had him settled, Eleanor left a lantern burning low and gentle instructions to call her if his condition changed. Left alone with the mysterious cowboy, Daisy pulled a chair beside the bed and studied his face in the golden lamplight. He was handsome in a rugged way, his jaw strong, his features weathered by sun and wind. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his dark hair curled slightly where it fell across his forehead. "Who are you, Nathan James?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. "And what brought you to our doorstep today?" As if sensing her scrutiny, his eyelids fluttered and he stirred restlessly. Daisy leaned forward, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Easy," she soothed. "You're safe." His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing as they found her face. "Miss Vaughn," he murmured. "You're a sight." "And you're delirious," she replied, unable to prevent the small smile that curved her lips. "How do you feel?" like I argued with a stampede. He attempted to sit up but fell back with a groan. "Your family." The simple question, his concern for people he'd never met, touched something deep inside her. "Everyone's fine, thanks to you." Nathan relaxed slightly, wincing as he shifted position. "Not just me. You're quite the markswoman." "My father insisted," Daisy explained, reaching for the water glass on the bedside table. "Said a woman alone in these parts needs more than just a pretty face to survive." She helped him drink, noticing how his hand trembled slightly as it brushed against hers. "Wise man, your father," Nathan said when he'd finished. "Though the pretty face doesn't hurt matters." A flush warmed Daisy's cheeks, and she busied herself rearranging the blanket to hide her reaction. "You should rest. Morning will come soon enough, and with it questions." Nathan caught her wrist gently as she pulled away. "Thank you, Miss Vaughn. Not everyone would take in a stranger covered in blood." "You took a bullet meant for me," she replied softly. "Rest now. We'll talk tomorrow." As she settled back in her chair for the long night ahead, Daisy found herself studying the rise and fall of his chest, reassuring herself with each breath that he would survive. Outside, coyotes called to one another across the vast emptiness of the Arizona night, and somewhere in the distance, Thunder rumbled the promise of rain that rarely delivered in this parched country. What Daisy couldn't know as she kept her silent vigil was that the arrival of Nathan James would change her life in ways she could never have imagined, bringing storms far more powerful than those that occasionally swept across the unforgiving landscape she called home. Dawn broke in a spectacular display of gold and crimson that spilled through the small window of the spare room. Daisy, who had dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, startled awake to find Nathan watching her, his blue eyes clear and alert. "Good morning," he said, his voice stronger than it had been the previous evening. Daisy straightened, smoothing her wrinkled skirt self-consciously. "You're looking better." "Feel better," he agreed, cautiously pushing himself to a sitting position. "Your mother's medicine works wonders." "She learned from her grandmother, a healer back east before they came west," Daisy explained, rising to her feet. "I should tell her you're awake." Nathan nodded, though something in his expression suggested he was reluctant to end their moment alone. "Of course." Daisy hurried to the kitchen, where her mother was already preparing breakfast. The savory smell of bacon frying and biscuits baking filled the warm room. "He's awake," Daisy announced. "Seems stronger this morning." Eleanor nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good. Your father will want to speak with him. Find out where he came from and what brought him here yesterday." "Do you think he might be running from something?" Daisy asked, the thought troubling her more than it should have. "Everyone who comes to places like Silver Creek is running from something, child," Eleanor replied with the wisdom of someone who had seen many souls pass through their lives. "The question is whether what's chasing him will bring trouble to our door." Before Daisy could respond, her father and brother entered from the barn, both men washing up at the basin by the door. "Stranger awake?" Thomas asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Yes," Daisy replied. "And clear-headed," Thomas nodded. "I'll speak with him after breakfast." "Daniel, ride over to the sheriff's office in town. Let Reynolds know what happened yesterday." Daniel, at 17 already showing signs of becoming as tall and broad-shouldered as his father, nodded eagerly. "What about the bodies?" "Already took care of them," Thomas said grimly. "Buried them out past the north pasture." Daisy prepared a tray for Nathan, adding an extra biscuit and a generous portion of bacon alongside the eggs and coffee. When she returned to his room, she found him attempting to stand, one hand braced against the bedpost for support. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, setting the tray down with more force than necessary. "You'll tear your stitches." Nathan had the grace to look sheepish. "I don't like imposing." "It's not imposing when you're invited," Daisy countered, guiding him back to sit on the edge of the bed. "Besides, you're in no condition to go anywhere just yet." Something flickered in his eyes, a moment of uncertainty, perhaps even fear, but it vanished so quickly that Daisy wondered if she'd imagined it. "Your father might disagree," Nathan said quietly. "Most men don't take kindly to strange cowboys bleeding all over their property." Daisy placed the tray across his lap. "My father is many things, Mr. James, but ungrateful isn't one of them. You helped save this ranch yesterday. He won't forget that." Nathan studied her for a long moment before picking up his fork. "You're very sure of people, Miss Vaughn." "Not people," she corrected. "My family." As he ate, Daisy found herself watching his hands, strong, capable hands that handled the utensils with unexpected grace. She noticed a faint scar that ran across the back of his right hand, disappearing beneath his sleeve. "You've seen your share of fights," she observed. Nathan followed her gaze to his scarred knuckles and nodded. "Life hasn't always been kind." "What brings you to Silver Creek?" she asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "We don't get many strangers passing through, especially ones willing to risk their lives for people they don't know." He took a sip of coffee, considering his answer. I'm looking for work. Heard McAllister's ranch might be hiring. It wasn't a lie exactly, but Daisy sensed there was more to his story than he was revealing. Before she could press further, her father appeared in the doorway, his imposing frame filling the space. "Mr. James," Thomas greeted with a nod. "Good to see you up. We've got some talking to do, I reckon." Nathan straightened as much as his injuries would allow. "Yes, sir, and I owe you my thanks for the hospitality." Thomas entered the room, gesturing for Daisy to leave them. She hesitated, reluctant to go, but a stern look from her father sent her on her way, though she didn't go far, lingering just outside the door where she could still hear their conversation. "Those men yesterday," Thomas began without preamble. "You know them?" "No, sir," Nathan replied. "I was riding past when I heard the shooting. Didn't sit right with me to keep going." "Most men would have," Thomas observed. "Especially in these parts." A pause followed, and Daisy imagined Nathan shrugging. "I've never claimed to be like most men, Mr. Vaughn." Her father's chuckle surprised her. "No, I don't suppose you have." The creak of the floorboard suggested he'd moved closer to the bed. "You said you're looking for work." "Yes, sir, I'm good with horses, can handle cattle too." "McAllister's a hard man to work for," Thomas said. "Fair, but demanding." "I don't mind hard work." Another silence stretched between them. Daisy held her breath, waiting. "We could use another hand around here," her father finally said. "At least until you're healed enough to move on. Ranch has been short-staffed since Peterson left last month." Daisy's heart quickened at the prospect of Nathan staying. She told herself it was merely gratitude that she owed him for his help, but deep down, she recognized the stirrings of something more complicated. "That's generous," Nathan replied cautiously, "but I wouldn't want charity." "It ain't charity if you work for it," Thomas countered. "Once you're able, of course. For now, you focus on healing. We can discuss terms later." Daisy stepped away from the door just as her father emerged. The knowing look he gave her suggested he'd been well aware of her eavesdropping, but he said nothing about it. "Show Mr. James where to find clean clothes," he instructed instead. "Some of Daniel's might fit him well enough until his own can be washed." With that, he strode away, leaving Daisy to return to Nathan's room with burning cheeks and a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the morning's excitement. "Your father offered me work," Nathan told her, a note of wonder in his voice. "Temporary, at least." "He's a good judge of character," Daisy replied, moving to the small chest of drawers against the wall. "And we do need the help." As she selected a shirt and trousers that might accommodate Nathan's broader shoulders and taller frame, she felt his gaze on her back. "You don't approve?" he asked quietly. Daisy turned, surprised. "Why would you think that?" "You've gone quiet," he observed. "And you won't look at me directly." She forced herself to meet his eyes, fighting the inexplicable warmth that rose to her face when she did. "I approve just fine, Mr. James. I simply wonder what a man like you is really doing in a place like Silver Creek." Instead of taking offense, Nathan smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face and sent an unwelcome thrill through Daisy's chest. "A man like me," he echoed. "And what kind of man might that be, Miss Vaughn?" "The kind who rides to the rescue without thought for his own safety," she replied honestly. "The kind with ghosts in his eyes." His smile faded, replaced by an expression she couldn't quite read. "Everyone has ghosts, Miss Vaughn, even in places as sunbaked as this." She placed the clothes on the foot of his bed, suddenly aware of the impropriety of being alone with him in this small room, despite his injured state. "Rest today," she said, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow, if you're able, I'll show you around the ranch." Nathan nodded, his blue eyes still holding hers. "I look forward to it." As Daisy closed the door behind her, she pressed a hand to her chest, willing her racing heart to calm. This strange, brave man with his mysterious past and piercing gaze was dangerous not because she feared him, but because she feared what his presence might awaken in her. She had built careful walls around her heart after watching too many women in these parts give themselves to men who couldn't or wouldn't stay. Silver Creek was no place for romance. It was a place for survival, for practicality, for building something that would last through drought and flood, through the harshness of winters and the scorching heat of summers. Yet as she went about her chores that day, Daisy found her thoughts returning again and again to Nathan James, to his wry smile, to the gentleness in his hands despite their strength, to the moment he had knelt in the dust, bloody but defiant, refusing to surrender even when most men would have fallen. "I ain't done fighting yet," he had said, and something in those words had resonated deep within her soul. For wasn't that the anthem of everyone who had ever tried to carve out a life in this beautiful, brutal land? Wasn't that what it meant to survive in a place that took more often than it gave? Perhaps, just perhaps, Nathan James wasn't so different from her after all. The next morning dawned cooler, with clouds building on the horizon that promised the rare blessing of rain. Daisy found Nathan already up and dressed in Daniel's borrowed clothes, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hands. "You should be resting," she chided, though without much conviction. He glanced up at her, a half-smile playing at his lips. "Never been much good at lying still. Besides, your mother checked my wounds this morning, said I'm healing well." Daisy sat beside him on the rough-hewn bench, accepting the cup of coffee he poured from the pot beside him. "She has a way with injuries, fixed me up more times than I can count. Accident-prone." He asked, amusement warming his voice. "Stubborn," she corrected. "Like someone else I recently met." That earned her a genuine laugh, a sound that seemed to transform his entire being. In that moment, with the early light softening his features and the lines of pain temporarily eased from around his eyes, Nathan looked younger, more carefree than she had yet seen him. "Your father's already gone out to the north pasture," he told her after a comfortable silence had settled between them. "Said something about checking fences before the rain comes." Daisy nodded, sipping her coffee. "He's been worried about the boundary line. McAllister's been pushing the limits of his property lately. Land disputes can turn ugly fast," Nathan observed, his tone suggesting personal experience. "Is that what happened to you?" Daisy asked before she could think better of it. "A land dispute?" Nathan's expression shuddered, the openness of moments before vanishing behind a carefully neutral mask. "Not exactly." She realized she'd overstepped and changed course. "I promised to show you the ranch today, if you're feeling up to it, that is." Relief flickered across his face at the change of subject. "I'd like that." An hour later they set out on horseback, Nathan on a gentle bay gelding named Chester, Daisy on her own spirited mare, Willow. Despite his injuries, Nathan sat easily in the saddle, his posture betraying years of experience on horseback. They rode at a leisurely pace, Daisy pointing out the boundaries of the Vaughn property as they went. "It's not as large as McAllister's spread," she explained as they crested a small rise that offered a view of the surrounding landscape. "But the water access makes it valuable. That creek that runs through the southern pasture never runs dry, even in the worst droughts." Nathan nodded, understanding the significance in a land where water meant life or death. "Your father chose well. How long have you been here?" "Since I was 8, Daisy replied, memories of the journey west still vivid after all these years. "My parents came from Pennsylvania. Father was a school teacher there, if you can believe it." Nathan studied her with surprise. "What made a school teacher decide to become a rancher?" Daisy smiled, remembering her father's tales of their decision to venture west. Mother's brother wrote to them about the opportunities out here. Said a man could own more land than he could see, raise cattle that would make him rich. Of course, he neglected to mention the drought, the rattlesnakes, and the occasional band of outlaws. Yet they stayed, Nathan observed. They stayed, Daisy confirmed. Mother says it's because father's too stubborn to admit a mistake. Father says it's because the land gets in your blood. And what do you say? Nathan asked, his gaze intent upon her face. Daisy looked out over the rugged beauty of the landscape, the distant mountains purple against the sky, the sweep of golden grasses, the dramatic clouds building to the west. I say they're both right, she finally answered. It's stubborn pride and love, all tangled up together. This place takes everything you have, demands sacrifices you never thought you'd make. But when the sun sets over those mountains, or when the first wildflowers bloom after winter, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. Something in Nathan's expression softened as he listened to her. You speak like a poet, Miss Vaughn, she laughed, embarrassed by her own eloquence. Hardly. Just a rancher's daughter who reads too many books. Books are good company, he remarked, especially on long trails. You raid. Daisy couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Many of the cowboys and ranch hands she'd met over the years barely knew their letters. Nathan's eyes twinkled with amusement. Don't sound so shocked. Even a dusty cowboy can appreciate Shakespeare. Before she could respond, a distant crack of thunder rumbled across the plains. The horses shifted nervously beneath them. We should head back, Daisy said, noting how quickly the storm clouds were moving their way. These summer storms can turn dangerous fast. They turned their mounts toward home, picking up the pace as the wind began to strengthen. Fat raindrops started to fall, scattered at first, then increasing in intensity until they were riding through a downpour. Despite the discomfort, Daisy couldn't help laughing as water streamed from the brim of her hat. Something funny about drowning on dry land. Nathan called over the noise of the storm, though he was smiling too. After 3 months of drought, I won't complain about a little rain, she called back. Their clothes were soaked through by the time they reached the barn. They dismounted quickly, leading their horses into the shelter of the sturdy building. The sudden quiet as they closed the doors behind them was almost shocking after the roar of the storm outside. Well, Nathan said, removing his hat and shaking water from it, that's one way to see the ranch. Daisy pushed wet strands of hair from her face, suddenly very aware of how her sodden clothes clung to her figure. Nathan seemed to realize it too, for he quickly averted his gaze, focusing instead on unsaddling Chester. They worked in companionable silence to rub down the horses and ensure they had fresh hay and water. By the time they finished, the worst of the storm had passed, though rain still pattered steadily on the roof overhead. We might as well wait it out, Daisy suggested, settling on a bale of hay. Unless you're eager to get soaked again. Nathan joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. I've been wetter, he said with a shrug, though not often in better company. The compliment brought warmth to Daisy's cheeks. To hide her reaction, she asked, How long have you been riding? You sit a horse like you were born to it. Since I was younger than I can remember, he replied. My father raised horses in Texas. Some of my earliest memories are of helping him with the foals. Texas, Daisy repeated, fitting this new piece into the puzzle of Nathan James. That explains the accent. He looked surprised. I have an accent, just a touch, she assured him with a smile. It comes through when you're tired or when your guard is down. Nathan studied her with newfound appreciation. You notice a lot, Miss Vaughn. Daisy, she said suddenly. Please. When it's just us, I'd prefer if you called me Daisy. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the steady drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional soft nickering of the horses. "Daisy," he repeated finally, her name sounding different special somehow in his low, gentle voice. "Then you must call me Nathan." She nodded, a strange flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Nathan," she agreed. Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change in the air as invisible, but as significant as the electricity that had charged the storm clouds. Daisy found herself noticing details she had tried to ignore. The way his damp shirt clung to the broad planes of his shoulders, the curl of dark hair against his neck, the intensity in his blue eyes as they held her gaze. "Tell me about your family," she said abruptly, needing to break the tension before it overwhelmed her. "Are they still in Texas?" Pain flashed across his features, quickly masked but unmistakable. "No," he said after a moment. "They're gone now." The simple statement held volumes of grief. Daisy's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried." Nathan shook his head. "You couldn't have known." He drew a deep breath as if gathering strength. "My parents died in a fire when I was 19. Our home, the stables, everything, gone in a single night." "Nathan," Daisy breathed, instinctively reaching to touch his arm. "That's terrible," he nodded, his gaze distant as if seeing the flames again. "It wasn't an accident. There was a land speculator named Harrison. He'd been trying to buy our property for months. My father refused to sell. Understanding dawned, and when he couldn't buy it, he took it another way," Nathan confirmed grimly. "At least that's what I believe happened. Never could prove it, though everyone in the county knew Harrison was behind it." Daisy's grip on his arm tightened. "What did you do?" Something dark and haunted entered his eyes. "What any son would do," I confronted him. "Things escalated." He fell silent, clearly unwilling to elaborate further, but Daisy could fill in the gaps. The scar on his hand, the practiced way he handled a gun, his appearance in Silver Creek far from Texas and whatever consequences had followed that confrontation. "Is that why you're here?" she asked softly. "Running from what happened?" Nathan met her gaze directly, unflinching despite the vulnerability of the moment. "I'm not proud of running, but Harrison had connections, powerful friends. When it became clear I'd never get justice through legal channels." "You had no choice," Daisy finished for him. "There's always a choice," he countered. "I chose to live, to start over somewhere new. I've been drifting for 3 years now, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." The rain had lessened to a gentle patter, but neither of them moved to leave the shelter of the barn. Something about the dim light and the isolation made it easier to speak truths that might have remained buried in the harsh clarity of day. "And now," Daisy asked, hardly daring to breathe, "will Silver Creek just be another brief stop?" Nathan looked down at where her hand still rested on his arm, then back to her face. Something in his expression shifted, softened. "I didn't plan to stay," he admitted, "but plans change." The words hung between them, laden with possibility. Daisy became acutely aware of how close they sat, of the warmth of his arm beneath her fingers, of the way his eyes lingered on her face. "We should go back to the house," she said, her voice sounding strangely husky to her own ears, "before they start to worry." Nathan nodded, though neither of them moved immediately. When he finally stood, extending his hand to help her up, Daisy accepted it and found herself reluctant to let go once she was on her feet. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me about your family." His smile was gentle, tinged with sadness but genuine. "Thank you for listening." They walked back to the house in companionable silence, the rain now just a light drizzle that sparkled in the emerging sunlight. Daisy stole glances at the man beside her, this mysterious cowboy who had ridden into her life just days ago, yet already felt like someone she had always known. Dangerous thoughts, she reminded herself. Dangerous to let herself imagine a future with a man who, by his own admission, never stayed anywhere long. Dangerous to feel this pull towards someone whose past might still be chasing him, bringing trouble in its wake. Yet as they reached the porch and Nathan held the door for her, his hand briefly, lightly touching the small of her back, Daisy couldn't deny the current that passed between them, a connection that defied logic or caution. Some dangers, it seemed, were worth risking after all. The following weeks established a routine at the Vaughn ranch. Nathan's wounds healed quickly under Alina's care, and soon he was working alongside Thomas and Daniel, mending fences, moving cattle, and proving himself a valuable addition to the ranch's operations. His way with horses was remarkable. Even the most skittish colts seemed to calm under his gentle but firm handling. Daisy found herself inventing reasons to cross his path throughout the day, bringing water to the men working in the fields, volunteering to help with the horses when she knew Nathan would be in the stables, lingering at the dinner table to hear his quiet contributions to the evening's conversation. Her mother noticed, of course. Alina Vaughn missed very little that happened under her roof. "He's a good man," she observed one evening as she and Daisy washed dishes together after supper. Through the window they could see Nathan and Thomas on the porch, deep in discussion about the coming cattle drive. "I know," Daisy replied, keeping her tone neutral despite the leap her heart gave at her mother's words. Alina studied her daughter's profile, but a restless one. Men like that. They don't always stay put, no matter what or who might give them reason to. Daisy concentrated on drying a plate, avoiding her mother's perceptive gaze. "I know that too. Do you?" Alina asked gently. "I see the way you look at him, Daisy. And the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Heat rose to Daisy's cheeks. "Is it that obvious?" Her mother's laugh was soft, sympathetic. "Only to someone who remembers what it's like to be young and falling in love." "I'm not," Daisy began, then stopped herself. Denying her feelings seemed pointless, especially to her mother. "He hasn't spoken of it, neither have I." "Some things don't need words," Alina replied, handing Daisy another dish to dry. "Just be careful with your heart, dear. That's all I ask." Daisy nodded, grateful for her mother's understanding rather than opposition. "He told me about his past, about what happened to his family." Alina's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's significant. Men like Nathan don't share their wounds easily." Before Daisy could respond, the back door opened and Daniel burst in, excitement written across his youthful features. "Sheriff's posse caught those rustlers that have been hitting the northern ranches," he announced. "Brought them into town this afternoon." The news brought relief. Cattle rustling had become an increasing problem in recent months, with several neighboring ranches losing significant portions of their herds. "Any of them connected to the men who attacked us?" Alina asked. Daniel shook his head. "Don't think so. Sheriff says they're part of the Carson gang from up near Flagstaff." Thomas and Nathan entered, having overheard the news from the porch. "That's good tidings," Thomas said. "Might mean we can ease up on the night patrols." Daisy noticed Nathan's expression had grown tense, his shoulders rigid. "The Carson gang," he repeated. "You're certain that's what the sheriff said?" Daniel nodded, oblivious to Nathan's sudden discomfort. "That's right. Sheriff's holding them for the federal marshal, says they'll likely hang for their crimes." Nathan said nothing more, but Daisy saw his hands clench briefly at his sides before he deliberately relaxed them. When he excused himself moments later to check on a horse he claimed had been favoring its left foreleg, Daisy waited only a few minutes before following him to the barn. She found him not with the horses but sitting on a hay bale, his head in his hands, the picture of a man wrestling with some inner turmoil. "Nathan," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up quickly, his expression guarded until he recognized her. Daisy, I'm sorry. I needed some air. She approached cautiously, sensing his distress. It wasn't a horse's leg that brought you out here, was it? A rueful smile briefly crossed his face. No, though I did check old Sam while I was here. His leg is fine. Daisy sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. What is it about the Carson gang that troubles you? Nathan was silent for so long that Daisy thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. I rode with them, he confessed, the words clearly costing him. Not for long, 3 months, maybe 4. After what happened with Harrison, I was angry, lost. They offered a sense of belonging when I had nothing else. Daisy absorbed this revelation, surprised but not as shocked as she might once have been. But you left them, he nodded, still not looking at her. Didn't take long to realize what they were, what I was becoming by staying with them. I left before. He swallowed hard. Before I crossed lines I couldn't uncross. And now they're here, Daisy said, understanding his distress. If they recognize your name or if someone connects you to them. It could mean trouble, Nathan finished grimly. For me, for your family, I should leave before that happens. The thought of him leaving sent a cold jolt through Daisy's chest. No, she said, more forcefully than she'd intended. Running now would only make you look guilty. I am guilty, he countered. Maybe not of rustling, but I rode with them. I knew what they were doing and said nothing. Daisy took his hand, forcing him to look at her. That was 3 years ago. You're not that man anymore. The pain and self-recrimination in his eyes nearly broke her heart. How can you be so sure? Because I know you, she said simply. The man who threw himself between me and danger. The man who works from sunrise to sunset without complaint. The man who reads poetry by lamplight and treats every creature on this ranch with kindness and respect. She tightened her grip on his hand. That's who you are, Nathan, not whatever mistake you made years ago. Something in his expression shifted, the anguish giving way to a different kind of intensity as he stared at her. Slowly, as if giving her every chance to pull away, he raised his free hand to her cheek, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. Daisy Vaughn, he murmured, you see good in me that I stopped believing existed long ago. Her heart hammered in her chest, her breath catching as he leaned closer. It's there, she whispered. I wouldn't love it if it wasn't. The word hung between them, love, unexpected yet utterly true. Nathan's eyes widened slightly, then softened with an emotion that mirrored her own. I should leave, he said again, though his hand remained on her cheek, his face inches from hers. For your sake, for your family's. Or you could stay, Daisy countered. Face whatever comes. Not alone, but with people who care about you. Nathan's thumb brushed across her lower lip, sending shivers down her spine. I haven't earned that kind of loyalty. You earned it the moment you knelt in the dust, bleeding but still fighting, she told him. Stay, Nathan, please. In answer, he closed the remaining distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss so gentle it felt like a question. Daisy responded with certainty, her hand coming up to curve around the nape of his neck, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened. Years of loneliness and longing poured into this single perfect moment. When they finally parted, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. If I stay, he said, his voice rough with emotion, it won't be just for now. It would be because I want to build something here. With you, if you'll have me. Joy blossomed in Daisy's chest, bright and overwhelming. I'll have you, she promised. Every stubborn, honorable inch of you. His laugh was soft against her lips as he kissed her again, briefly but with unmistakable passion. We should go back to the house, he said reluctantly, before your father comes looking for us with his shotgun. Daisy smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. He likes you, you know. More than he'd admit. Let's not test that theory by being found alone in the barn after dark, Nathan suggested wryly, standing and offering her his hand. As they walked back to the house, fingers intertwined, Daisy knew challenges lay ahead Nathan's past. The presence of the Carson gang in town, the inevitable questions their relationship would raise. But for the first time, she felt those challenges wouldn't have to be faced alone. The man beside her had proven his courage in dust and blood. Together, they could weather whatever storms might come. The next morning, Nathan approached Thomas Vaughn as he worked in the corral, training a spirited young mare. Daisy watched from the kitchen window, her heart in her throat, knowing what Nathan intended to discuss. The conversation appeared serious but not contentious. Her father nodded several times, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. When Nathan extended his hand, Thomas clasped it firmly, and Daisy released the breath she'd been holding. "Well?" her mother asked, pausing in her bread-making to join Daisy at the window. "I think it went well," Daisy replied, still watching as the two men returned to working with the horse, their manner comfortable with each other. "At least Pa didn't reach for his rifle." Alina chuckled. "Your father respects Nathan, has from the beginning." She returned to her dough, adding casually, "He told me last night he wouldn't be surprised if Nathan asked for permission to court you properly." Daisy whirled to face her mother. "He did? What did you say?" "I said you're a grown woman with a good head on your shoulders," Alina replied, her eyes twinkling. "And that Nathan James is the kind of man who might actually deserve you." Warmth flooded Daisy's chest. "Thank you, Ma." Later that morning, when Nathan found her hanging laundry in the yard, his smile confirmed what she'd suspected. "Your father has given his blessing," he told her, taking a wet sheet from the basket to help her hang it. "Though not without making it very clear what would happen if I ever caused you pain," Daisy laughed. "Let me guess, something involving his hunting rifle and a shallow grave." "Something like that," Nathan agreed with a grin. "He also said I should accompany him to town tomorrow. Sheriff Reynolds wants to interview everyone who's had trouble with rustlers in recent months." Her smile faltered. "Will that be a problem? With the Carson gang there?" Nathan's expression grew serious. "It's a risk, but your father's right hiding would only raise suspicions. Better to face it directly." "I'm coming with you," Daisy decided immediately. "Daisy, don't argue," she interrupted firmly. "We face this together. That's how it works from now on." The look he gave her, then part exasperation, part admiration, and overwhelming tenderness, made her heart skip. "Yes, madam," he conceded with a mock salute. The journey to Silver Creek the next day was tense despite the beautiful weather. Thomas drove the wagon with Daisy beside him, while Nathan rode alongside on Chester. The small town appeared on the horizon after an hour's travel, a dusty collection of wooden buildings straddling the stage road, with the sheriff's office prominently positioned at the center of the main street. Several horses were hitched outside, suggesting Reynolds already had visitors. As they pulled up, the door opened, and a tall man in a worn duster emerged. He paused on the boardwalk, lighting a cigar, his gaze sweeping casually over the new arrivals. Daisy felt Nathan stiffen beside her, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "Problem?" Thomas asked quietly, noticing the change. "That man," Nathan replied, his voice barely audible. "He rode with Carson, name's Hawkins, mean as they come." Thomas nodded almost imperceptibly. "Stay with the wagon. Let me speak to Reynolds first." Before he could dismount, however, Hawkins spotted them and his eyes narrowed as they locked on Nathan. Recognition dawned on his weather-beaten face, followed by a slow, dangerous smile. "Well, well," he called, loud enough to draw attention from passers-by. "If it ain't Nathan James." "Long time no see, partner." Daisy's heart sank as heads turned their way. Nathan straightened in his saddle, his hand casually drifting to rest near his holstered revolver. "Hawkins," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Didn't expect to see you walking free." The man's smile widened. "Made a deal with the sheriff. Turned evidence against Carson in exchange for leniency." He took a step closer, malice glinting in his eyes. "Might have mentioned you too. Sheriff's real interested in hearing about all of Carson's former associates." Thomas dismounted, positioning himself between Hawkins and the wagon. "Whatever business you think you have with James, it can wait. We're here to see Sheriff Reynolds on ranch matters." Hawkins laughed, the sound ugly and mocking. "Ranch matters? That what you tell these good folks, James?" "That you're a rancher now." He addressed Thomas directly. "You know who you're harboring, old man. This here's one of Carson's most trusted men, helped plan half their jobs before he lost his nerve and ran." A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. Daisy saw Nathan's jaw tighten, but he remained composed. "That was a long time ago," Nathan said evenly. "I've paid for my mistakes." "Have you now?" Hawkins sneered. "Sheriff might disagree, as might the families whose cattle you helped steal." Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion, his movement causing Hawkins to take an involuntary step back despite his bravado. "I never stole so much as a calf," Nathan stated, his voice low but carrying. "And I left before anyone got hurt. You know that's true, Hawkins." "Truth's a flexible thing," Hawkins replied with a shrug. "Especially when a man's looking at hanging." The sheriff's office door opened again, and a stocky man with a silver star pinned to his vest emerged, surveying the scene with narrow eyes. "What's the commotion out here?" "Got a reunion, Sheriff," Hawkins called, gesturing toward Nathan with his cigar. "Nathan James here used to ride with Carson. Thought you might want to know." Sheriff Reynolds studied Nathan with newfound interest. "That's so." Before Nathan could respond, Thomas stepped forward. "Sheriff, whatever this man is implying, Nathan James has been working on my ranch for the past month. Saved my daughter's life when outlaws attacked our property. He's a good man." "Wasn't always," Hawkins interjected. "Ask him about Willow Creek. Ask him about the Pearson place." Daisy saw Nathan flinch almost imperceptibly at the mention of Willow Creek, though he maintained his outward calm. "I rode with Carson briefly 3 years ago," Nathan admitted to the sheriff. "Left when I realized what they were. Haven't had any contact with them since." Reynolds scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Convenient timing, you showing up just as we capture most of the gang." "He's been with us for weeks," Daisy spoke up, unable to remain silent any longer. "Working harder than any man I've ever seen. Whatever he might have done in the past, he's not that person anymore." The sheriff's gaze shifted to her, then back to Nathan. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I think you'd better come inside, Mr. James. We have some things to discuss." Nathan nodded, his expression resigned. "Yes, sir." As he moved to follow Reynolds, he paused beside the wagon where Daisy sat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "It will be all right," he told her softly. "Truth's on our side." "I'll be waiting," she promised, fighting to keep her voice steady. "However long it takes." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on his daughter's arm before turning to follow Nathan and the sheriff into the office. Hawkins remained on the boardwalk, a smug smile distorting his features as he watched them go. "Quite a man you've got there, Missy," he commented to Daisy, his tone mockingly sympathetic. "Shame he'll likely hang before the month's out." Daisy fixed him with a cold stare that belied the fear churning in her stomach. "The only shame would be if men like you were allowed to destroy good men like him with your lies." Hawkins' smile faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. Ain't lies if they're true, girl. Your precious cowboy has blood on his hands, same as the rest of us." Before she could retort, the door of the general store across the street opened, and Alina Vaughn emerged, surprise registering on her face as she spotted her daughter. "Daisy, I didn't expect to see you in town today." She approached the wagon, her shrewd gaze taking in the tense scene her daughter's rigid posture, the unpleasant-looking stranger on the boardwalk, the absence of both her husband and Nathan. "What's happening?" Daisy explained the situation in low, urgent tones while Hawkins, losing interest now that his primary target was inside with the sheriff, sauntered toward the saloon at the end of the street. Alina's expression grew grave as she listened. "I see," she said when Daisy finished. "Well, we can't just sit here waiting. Come with me." "Where?" Daisy asked, though she was already climbing down from the wagon. "To see Judge Hollister," Alina replied decisively. "His wife is an old friend and he's a fair man. If anyone can ensure Nathan gets a proper hearing instead of a lynch mob, it's him." Hope flickered in Daisy's chest. Judge Hollister was indeed respected throughout the territory for his impartiality and wisdom. "Do you think he'll help?" "He'll listen," Alina said, which was not quite the same thing but better than nothing. Right now, that's what Nathan needs most, someone in authority willing to hear his full story. As they made their way toward the judge's residence at the edge of town, Daisy sent a silent prayer heavenward. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected man. She refused to believe it could be snatched away so cruelly, just as it had begun to bloom. Nathan would not face this alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together, just as they had promised each other beneath the rafters of a simple barn, with the future stretching before them like an unwritten page. Judge Hollister's home was a modest but well-maintained two-story house set back from the main street, surrounded by a picket fence and boasting the only true garden in Silver Creek, a testament to Mrs. Hollister's determination to bring Eastern refinement to the rugged frontier. The judge himself answered the door, his white hair and beard giving him a patriarchal appearance that matched his reputation. His eyebrows rose in surprise at the sight of Alina and Daisy. "Mrs. Vaughn," he greeted them cordially, "this is an unexpected pleasure." "Judge Hollister," Alina replied, "I apologize for calling unannounced, but we have an urgent matter that requires your attention." The judge studied their faces, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. "Of course, please come in." "Inside, Mrs." Hollister provided tea while Daisy and Alina took turns explaining Nathan's predicament. The judge listened attentively, asking occasional questions but mostly allowing them to speak without interruption. "I see," he said when they had finished. "This is concerning indeed. Sheriff Reynolds is a good man, but he's under considerable pressure to resolve these rustling cases, and Hawkins is not a reliable character by any measure. Nathan admits he rode with Carson briefly," Daisy acknowledged, "but he left before any serious crimes were committed. He's been trying to rebuild his life ever since." Judge Hollister nodded thoughtfully. "Many men have pasts they're not proud of, especially in territories like this where the line between law and lawlessness can blur. The question is not just what he did then, but what kind of man he is now." "He's a good man," Daisy said fervently. "Honest, hardworking, brave. He nearly died protecting our family from outlaws." The judge smiled gently at her passion. "I can see you care deeply for him, Miss Vaughn. That speaks well of his character." He rose from his chair. "I'll go speak with Reynolds now. No promises, but I'll ensure Mr. James receives fair treatment under the law." Relief washed over Daisy. "Thank you, Judge Hollister." As the judge prepared to leave, he turned back with one final question. "This man, Nathan James, you say he's been working at your ranch. What are his intentions there? Is he simply passing through, or does he plan to stay in Silver Creek? Daisy felt heat rise to her cheeks. He has asked permission to court me properly, with my father's blessing. Understanding dawned in the judge's eyes. I see. Then there's even more at stake. He donned his hat. Wait here with Mrs. Hollister. I'll return as soon as I can. The wait seemed interminable. Mrs. Hollister, sensing their anxiety, kept them supplied with tea and tried to distract them with town gossip. But Daisy could barely focus on the conversation. Her mind kept returning to Nathan, to his face as he'd followed the sheriff inside, to his promise that the truth would protect them, to the future they had just begun to imagine together. Nearly 2 hours passed before the judge returned, accompanied by Thomas Vaughn. Daisy leapt to her feet. Pa! What happened? Where's Nathan? Thomas's expression was grim but not despairing. Still at the sheriff's office. They're taking statements. Judge Hollister removed his hat, running a hand through his white hair. It's a complicated situation. Hawkins has made serious accusations, claiming Nathan was deeply involved in Carson's operations. However, his testimony is questionable at best, given his own admitted crimes and his clear motivation to implicate others to save himself. What does that mean for Nathan? Daisy pressed, her heart racing. For now, the sheriff is holding him while they sort through the evidence, the judge explained. I've convinced Reynolds to telegraph the authorities in the areas where these crimes occurred, to verify details and determine Nathan's actual involvement, if any. So he's in jail? Daisy asked, dismayed. Thomas nodded heavily. For the time being, but the judge has guaranteed a fair hearing once all the information is gathered. How long will that take? Elena inquired practically. A few days, perhaps a week, Judge Hollister replied. Telegraph lines being what they are. Daisy's mind raced. A week was an eternity with Nathan locked behind bars, facing uncertain charges. Can I see him? She asked. The judge and her father exchanged glances. Reynolds has agreed to allow brief visits, Thomas confirmed. Under supervision, of course. Then I want to go now, Daisy stated firmly. No one attempted to dissuade her. Thomas escorted her back to the sheriff's office, while Elena remained to thank the Hollisters for their assistance. The walk seemed both too long and too short, Daisy dreading yet desperately needing to see Nathan, to reassure herself that he was all right. The sheriff's deputy, a young man named Collins, led them to the cells at the back of the building. There were only 2, Silver Creek being too small to require extensive holding facilities. Nathan occupied one, while the other sat empty. He stood as they approached, his hands gripping the iron bars, his face lighting up at the sight of Daisy despite the gravity of his situation. 5 minutes, Deputy Collins announced before retreating to give them a semblance of privacy, though he remained within earshot. Are you all right? Daisy asked immediately, moving as close to the bars as she could. Nathan's smile was genuine if tired. Better now, he said softly. I was worried about you after Hawkins made his accusations. Me? Daisy shook her head in disbelief. You're the one behind bars and you're worried about me, always, he replied simply. Thomas cleared his throat. Judge Hollister is intervening on your behalf. Says he'll ensure you get a fair hearing. Gratitude washed over Nathan's features. Thank you, sir. That's more than I expected. Don't thank me yet, Thomas cautioned. Hollister's influence only goes so far. We still need to disprove Hawkins' claims. Nathan nodded, his expression somber. There might be a way. When I left Carson's gang, I kept a journal. Names, dates, details of their operations, both what they'd done and what they were planning. I thought, if things ever caught up with me, it might prove useful. Hope surged through Daisy. Where is it? "Hidden in my saddlebags," Nathan replied. "In the false bottom of the right one. I never go anywhere without it." Thomas nodded briskly. "I'll find it when we return to the ranch." "There's something else," Nathan added, his voice dropping lower, "about Willow Creek." Hawkins mentioned it for a reason. It was Carson's biggest job, a payroll robbery that went wrong. A guard was killed. Daisy's breath caught. "Were you involved?" "No," Nathan said firmly. "I'd already left by then, but Hawkins doesn't know that. He's assuming I was part of it because I helped scout the location weeks earlier, before I knew what they were planning." "The journal will help prove that," Thomas reasoned, "if the dates match up." "They do," Nathan confirmed. "But there's more. I know who shot that guard. It was Hawkins himself. He bragged about it later to a mutual acquaintance, who told me when our paths crossed months after I'd left the gang. That's in the journal too." Understanding dawned on Daisy. "That's why he's so eager to implicate you. He's trying to protect himself." Nathan nodded grimly. "If I go down for Willow Creek, his deal with the sheriff looks better, and he eliminates the one person who knows the truth about what he did." Thomas's expression hardened. "We'll get the journal. In the meantime, say nothing more about Willow Creek to anyone. Let Hawkins think his plan is working." "Be careful," Nathan warned. "Hawkins isn't the type to leave loose ends if he suspects you're searching for evidence against him." "We can handle ourselves," Thomas assured him. Deputy Collins approached, signaling that their time was up. Daisy, reluctant to leave, pressed her hand against Nathan's where it gripped the iron bar. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promised. The look he gave her, then tender, determined, and unwaveringly loyal, nearly broke her heart. "I'll be counting the minutes," he replied softly. As they were led back to the front office, Daisy's mind was already forming a plan. They needed that journal, and they needed to expose Hawkins for what he truly was. Nathan's freedom and their future together depended on it. The journey back to the ranch was tense but purposeful. Thomas drove the wagon with grim determination while Daisy led Chester, Nathan's mount. They spoke little, both lost in thoughts of what lay ahead. At the ranch, Daniel and Alina were waiting anxiously. After a brief explanation of what had transpired, they all moved to the barn where Nathan's saddlebags hung on a peg near Chester's stall. Thomas examined the right bag carefully, running his fingers along the seams until he found the hidden compartment in the bottom. From it, he extracted a small, leather-bound journal, its pages worn from frequent handling. "This is it," he confirmed, leafing through the neat, detailed entries. "Dates, locations, names. Everything Nathan said would be here." "What about Willow Creek?" Daisy asked, peering over her father's shoulder. "And Hawkins?" Thomas turned several pages before stopping, his expression darkening as he read. "It's here. Nathan left Carson's gang 2 weeks before the Willow Creek robbery. And there's an entry dated 6 months later where he records his conversation with someone named Martinez, who told him about Hawkins' role in the guard's death." Relief flooded through Daisy. "This proves Nathan's innocence." "It helps," Thomas agreed cautiously. "But it's still his word and this journal against Hawkins. We need more." Alina, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Perhaps this Martinez person could testify, if we could find him." Thomas checked the journal again. "Says here Martinez was heading to Santa Fe." "That was over 2 years ago. It's something to consider," Alina mused. "But for now, this journal is our best evidence. We should take it to Judge Hollister immediately." "I'll go," Daisy volunteered quickly. Her father shook his head. "It's too dangerous. If Hawkins suspects what we're doing, he won't suspect me," Daisy argued. "A young woman visiting town to shop won't draw attention. I can speak with the judge discreetly." Thomas looked unconvinced, but Alina laid a hand on his arm. "She's right, Thomas. Daisy has the best chance of delivering this without raising suspicions. After further debate, they agreed Daisy would return to town the following morning, ostensibly to bring Nathan a change of clothes, but actually to deliver the journal to Judge Hollister. Daniel would accompany her for protection, but would remain with the wagon while she conducted her business. That night, Daisy barely slept, her mind churning with worry for Nathan and determination to see him freed. By dawn, she was dressed and ready, the precious journal hidden in a false bottom of a basket of provisions, covered by a fresh shirt and other items for Nathan. The town seemed quieter than usual when they arrived mid-morning. Daniel remained with the horses while Daisy made her way first to the sheriff's office, where Deputy Collins was on duty. "I've brought some things for Mr. James," she explained, showing him the basket with its visible contents. Collins nodded, glancing through the items perfunctorily. "Sheriff's not here right now, but you can see the prisoner for a few minutes." Daisy found Nathan sitting on the narrow cot in his cell, looking tired but alert. His face brightened when he saw her. "I wasn't sure you'd come today," he admitted as Collins led her into the cell corridor before retreating to give them limited privacy. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Daisy replied, keeping her voice low. She handed him the basket, adding in a whisper, "We found it. I'm taking it to Judge Hollister next." Relief washed over Nathan's features. "Be careful. Hawkins was here earlier watching the sheriff question the other prisoners. He's nervous, which makes him dangerous." "I'll be fine," she assured him. "Daniel's with me, and the judge's house is just down the street." Nathan reached through the bars, taking her hand in his. "When this is over," he said softly, "I want to talk about our future. A real future, Daisy, together." Her heart soared despite their circumstances. "I'd like that." Their time cut short by Collins's return, Daisy reluctantly left the sheriff's office and headed toward Judge Hollister's residence. She was halfway there when a voice called out behind her. "Miss Vaughn, a moment, please." She turned to find Hawkins approaching, his thin smile doing nothing to mask the coldness in his eyes. Instinctively, she tightened her grip on the basket. "Mr. Hawkins," she acknowledged coolly, "I have nothing to say to you." "Now that ain't friendly," he replied, falling into step beside her. "I was just thinking we might have a conversation about your friend. Nathan and I go way back, you know." "So you've said," Daisy replied, quickening her pace. "Excuse me, but I have errands to run." Hawkins matched her stride. "Visiting the prisoner, were you? Touching. But foolish to pin your hopes on a man like James. He'll hang for Willow Creek." "He wasn't even there," Daisy snapped before she could stop herself. Something sharp and calculating flashed in Hawkins's eyes. "Now how would you know that, I wonder? Unless he's been spinning tales, trying to save his own neck at my expense, perhaps." Daisy realized her mistake too late. She'd revealed that Nathan had discussed Willow Creek with her and implicitly Hawkins's involvement. "I know because I know the kind of man he is," she recovered, trying to sound confident rather than frightened. "Now please leave me be." She turned down a side street, hoping to lose him, but Hawkins followed, his manner becoming more menacing. "What's in the basket, Miss Vaughn?" he asked, his tone conversational but his eyes hard. "Seems like you're mighty protective of it." "Nothing that concerns you," Daisy retorted, looking around for help. The street was nearly deserted, most townsfolk inside during the heat of the day. Hawkins stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "I think it does concern me. I think your cowboy kept records, the kind that might contradict my testimony." Fear clenched in Daisy's stomach, but she forced herself to stand tall. "Step aside, Mr. Hawkins, or I'll scream loud enough to bring every man in Silver Creek running." "Scream all you want," Hawkins replied with a shrug. "By the time anyone arrives, I'll have what I came for." His hand moved toward the basket. Without hesitation, Daisy swung the basket hard, catching him in the chest and momentarily throwing him off balance. She turned to run, but he recovered quickly, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "You shouldn't have done that," he growled, reaching for the basket again. A sharp click froze them both, the unmistakable sound of a revolver being cocked. "Take your hands off my sister," Daniel's voice commanded from behind them. Hawkins turned slowly, his grip on Daisy loosening. Daniel stood 10 feet away, his father's revolver held steady in hands that showed no sign of trembling despite his youth. "This is a private conversation, boy," Hawkins said, though he released Daisy entirely. "Best move along." "Daisy?" Daniel questioned, not lowering the gun. "He knows about the journal," she explained, moving away from Hawkins toward her brother. "He was trying to take it." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "The journal that proves you killed that guard at Willow Creek?" he asked Hawkins directly. "The one that shows Nathan wasn't even there?" Fury twisted Hawkins's features. "You're bluffing. James wouldn't keep something like that." "Wouldn't he?" Daisy countered, gaining courage now that Daniel was present. "A smart man keeps insurance, especially when riding with men like you." Hawkins's hand moved toward his own gun, but Daniel's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't. I may be young, but my father taught me to shoot before I could ride. I won't miss at this distance." For a tense moment, Hawkins seemed to consider his options. Then, abruptly, he backed away. "This isn't over," he warned. "That journal won't save James, and it won't save either of you if you get in my way." With that, he turned and strode away, his posture rigid with barely contained rage. Once he was out of sight, Daniel lowered the gun, his young face pale but determined. "We need to get to the judge. Now." They hurried to Judge Hollister's house, looking over their shoulders constantly. The judge listened gravely to their account and examined the journal with careful attention. "This is significant evidence," he confirmed. "Not conclusive on its own, but enough to cast serious doubt on Hawkins's testimony." He closed the journal thoughtfully. "I'll speak with Sheriff Reynolds immediately. In the meantime, you two should return to your ranch. It's not safe for you in town with Hawkins in this state." "But Nathan," Daisy began to protest. "Will be safer if Hawkins doesn't have you as leverage," the judge interrupted gently. "I give you my word, Miss Vaughn, I will do everything in my power to see justice done." Reluctantly, Daisy agreed. As they prepared to leave, Judge Hollister added one final caution: "Be vigilant on your journey home. Hawkins strikes me as a man who doesn't accept defeat easily." The warning proved prescient. They were halfway back to the ranch when Daniel spotted dust on the horizon behind them. "Riders," he said grimly. "3 of them, coming fast." Daisy glanced back, her heart sinking as she recognized Hawkins's distinctive duster among the approaching horsemen. "We can't outrun them in the wagon," she realized aloud, "and we can't lead them back to the ranch." Daniel nodded, his young face set with determination beyond his years. "There's the old Miller place," he suggested, pointing to a dilapidated homestead visible on a ridge to their right. "We could make a stand there if we have to." It wasn't an appealing option, but it was their best. Daniel turned the wagon off the main trail, urging the horses to greater speed across the rough terrain. The abandoned Miller homestead, a failed farm whose owners had retreated east the previous year, consisted of a small cabin and barn, both weathered but still structurally sound. They reached it barely minutes before their pursuers. Daniel helped Daisy down from the wagon, then grabbed his father's rifle and the revolver. "Get inside," he instructed. "Use the wagon for cover." Daisy shook her head firmly. "I'm not hiding while you face them alone." "I can shoot too, remember." There was no time to argue. Hawkins and his companions, rough-looking men Daisy didn't recognize from town, had already crested the rise and were approaching rapidly. Take the rifle, Daniel conceded, handing it to her. Stay behind the wagon. I'll try to talk to them first. Daisy positioned herself as directed, the rifle ready but not yet aimed as the three riders pulled up a short distance away. That's far enough, Daniel called out, his voice impressively steady for a 17-year-old facing armed men. Hawkins raised his hands in a mocking gesture of peace. No need for guns, boy, we just want to talk. Nothing to talk about, Daniel replied. Judge Hollister has the journal now. It's over, Hawkins. The outlaw's face darkened. It's not over until I say it is. That journal is hearsay at best. My word against James's. And James won't be around to testify if something unfortunate happens to him in that jail cell. Fear and anger surged through Daisy in equal measure. If you harm him, she called out, abandoning pretense of hiding, the judge will know exactly who's responsible. Hawkins's gaze shifted to her, his expression calculating. Perhaps, but a grieving widow might be persuaded to leave town rather than pursue justice, especially if her family's safety were in question. The implication was clear and chilling. Daniel raised his revolver. You're threatening the wrong family, Hawkins. Last chance to ride away. For answer, Hawkins nodded almost imperceptibly to his companions. One of them suddenly spurred his horse forward, while the other drew his gun with practiced speed. What followed was chaos. Daniel fired at the charging rider, hitting him in the shoulder but not stopping his advance. Daisy swung the rifle toward the second man, her shot going wide as he returned fire, splintering wood from the wagon beside her head. Hawkins used the distraction to circle around, trying to flank them. Daisy spotted him just in time, pivoting to fire in his direction. Her bullet caught his horse, which reared in pain, throwing Hawkins to the ground. Daniel was struggling with the wounded rider, who had reached the wagon and was attempting to drag him from cover. The third man was reloading, preparing to take another shot at Daisy. Desperate, she aimed carefully and fired again. This time her bullet found its mark, striking the man in the chest. He tumbled from his saddle, unmoving. The wounded rider, seeing his companion fall, released Daniel and stumbled backward, clutching his bloody shoulder. "This ain't worth dying for," he muttered, staggering toward his horse. Hawkins, recovering from his fall, saw the tide turning. With a curse, he drew his revolver and fired wildly in Daisy's direction. She ducked behind the wagon wheel as bullets thudded into the wood around her. "Daniel," she called urgently, needing to know her brother was safe. "I'm here," he responded from behind another section of the wagon. "Reload." Daisy fumbled with cartridges, her fingers trembling as Hawkins continued firing. Then, suddenly, a new sound joined the cacophony hoofbeats approaching rapidly from the direction of town. "Put down your weapons," a commanding voice bellowed. "Sheriff's office." Daisy risked a glance around the wagon to see Sheriff Reynolds riding toward them, flanked by Deputy Collins, and her heart leapt Nathan James, all three with weapons drawn. Hawkins, seeing himself outnumbered, threw down his gun in disgust. His wounded companion had already raised his hands in surrender. "Nathan!" Daisy cried, relief washing over her as she emerged from behind the wagon. Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion, crossing the distance between them in long strides. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if to reassure himself she was truly unharmed. When the judge brought the journal to the sheriff, he explained against her hair, Reynolds realized what might happen. "We rode out as soon as we could." Sheriff Reynolds approached, leading a subdued Hawkins with his hands bound behind him. "Miss Vaughn, Mr. Vaughn," he acknowledged with a nod. "I owe you an apology, and you too, James. Seems I placed my trust in the wrong man." "The journal?" Daisy asked, still not quite believing the nightmare was over. Confirms everything James claimed, Reynolds replied. And Judge Hollister has already telegraphed the territorial marshal about the Willow Creek robbery. They're very interested in Hawkins's actual role in that affair. Hawkins glared at them all with undisguised hatred. This changes nothing. The law's still after you, James. Maybe not for Willow Creek, but Carson's boys did plenty you were part of. Nathan met his gaze steadily. I'm done running from my past, Hawkins. Whatever I did, I'll answer for honestly. But I won't let you or anyone else destroy the future I'm trying to build. As the sheriff led Hawkins away, Daisy looked up at Nathan, seeing in his eyes the same mix of emotions she felt: relief, exhaustion, and overwhelming gratitude that they had both survived to see this moment. "You're free," she said softly, still hardly daring to believe it. Nathan's hand came up to cradle her cheek. "Thanks to you. Your courage, your faith in me." He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. "What happens now?" she asked, suddenly uncertain despite everything they'd been through together. His smile was gentle, his eyes filled with a promise that made her heart race. "Now, Daisy Vaughn, if you'll allow it, I aim to court you properly. To build a life here with you if you'll have me." In answer, Daisy rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his, a gesture of affirmation more powerful than any words could express. Around them, the landscape stretched golden under the afternoon sun. The same harsh, beautiful land that had shaped them both, tested them, and ultimately brought them together. As Nathan's arms tightened around her, Daisy knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges still lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced this one together, unbowed, refusing to surrender to fear or doubt. For wasn't that what he had promised that first day, kneeling in the dust with determination blazing in his eyes? "I ain't done fighting yet," he had said. And in those words had been a declaration not just of courage but of hope that even in the wildest, most unforgiving places, love could take root and flourish. Here, in Nathan's embrace with the vast Arizona sky spreading overhead, Daisy found that hope blossoming into certainty, a future as boundless and promising as the frontier itself. 2 months later, as autumn painted the landscape in subtle golds and russets, Nathan James stood before the small church in Silver Creek, watching as Daisy Vaughn walked toward him on her father's arm. Her dress, a creation of ivory satin that Alina had spent weeks perfecting, caught the light filtering through the simple stained glass windows, giving her an almost ethereal glow. The church was filled with well-wishers, neighbors, friends, and even Judge Hollister and his wife, who had become unexpected allies and supporters. Sheriff Reynolds stood near the back, his presence a tacit acknowledgement that Nathan James was now a respected member of the community, rather than a man with a questionable past. That past had not disappeared entirely. After Hawkins's arrest and subsequent confession to the Willow Creek murder, the territorial authorities had reviewed Nathan's involvement with Carson's gang. His honesty, combined with the detailed journal and his actions in helping bring Hawkins to justice, had resulted in a formal pardon for any minor offenses he might have committed during his brief association with the outlaws. As Daisy reached him at the altar, her eyes shining with happiness, Nathan found himself marveling at how completely his life had transformed in the span of a few short months. From a drifter with no home and no future to a man with roots, purpose, and most miraculously of all, love. "You look beautiful," he whispered as Thomas placed Daisy's hand in his. Her smile was radiant. "And you look like you belong here," she whispered back. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged vows beneath the same roof where generations of Silver Creek residents had marked life's most significant moments. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests seemed to lift the very rafters. The celebration continued at the Vaughn ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and lanterns hung from tree branches to illuminate the festivities as day faded into evening. Musicians from town played lively tunes while couples danced and children darted between the adults' legs in impromptu games of tag. As darkness fell, and the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Nathan found a moment of quiet with his new wife. They stood together on the porch, slightly removed from the ongoing celebration, his arm around her waist as they looked out over the land that was now their shared home. Thomas Vaughn had surprised them both by signing over a portion of the ranch's northern section, as a wedding gift, enough land for them to build their own house and contribute meaningfully to the ranch's operations while maintaining some independence. Happy? Nathan asked softly, pressing a kiss to Daisy's temple. She leaned into him, her contentment almost palpable. More than I ever thought possible, and you, I never believed I'd have this, he admitted. A home, a family, a future not shadowed by the past. Daisy turned in his arms to face him, her expression serious despite the joy of the day. The past is part of who you are, Nathan, the good and the bad. I love all of it because it brought you here, to this place, to me. He kissed her then, pouring into the gesture all the gratitude and devotion he felt for this remarkable woman who had seen beyond his mistakes to the man he could become, the man he wanted to be for her. When they parted, breathless and smiling, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I made you a promise the day we met, he reminded her. Do you remember? Daisy nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears of happiness. You said you weren't done fighting yet. And I meant it, he assured her, his voice husky with emotion. Whatever comes, whatever challenges we face, I'll never stop fighting for us, for this life we're building together. I know, she replied simply. That's why I fell in love with you. That's why I know we'll be all right no matter what. From the yard came the sound of laughter as Daniel, now 18 and increasingly confident in his role at the ranch, regaled a group of young women with the tale of the confrontation at the Miller Place's version. Nathan noted with amusement, growing more heroic with each telling. Eleanor Vaughn appeared in the doorway, her face softened by the day's happiness. They're asking for the bride and groom, she told them with a knowing smile. One more dance before the night ends. Nathan offered Daisy his arm with exaggerated formality. Mrs. James, may I have the honor? She laughed, the same bright, joyful sound that had first captured his heart on a rain-soaked afternoon in a dusty barn. You may indeed, Mr. James. As they rejoined their guests, moving into each other's arms for a dance beneath the stars of a clear Arizona night, Nathan reflected that some journeys, no matter how difficult or unlikely their beginnings, led exactly where they were meant to. His had led here to Silver Creek, to the Vaughn Ranch, to Daisy, to a life built on truth rather than running, on love rather than fear. A life worth fighting for, worth believing in. And as he held his bride close, swaying to the music while friends and family looked on with approval, Nathan James knew with absolute certainty that the best parts of their story were still waiting to be written together. One day at a time, in the home and the future they would build with their own hands, their own hearts, their own unbreakable determination to create something lasting in this wild, beautiful land.